The draft is over. We have picks to cover, undrafted free agents to get into, and other weird drama from the weekend. Welcome to the Flight Plan. I'm Tim McMaster along with Zack Rosenblatt. He covers the Jets for The Athletic. Thanks for tuning in. If you are joining us on YouTube, thanks for coming in the morning, even though apparently I put PM in the scheduling of the show. But it looks like people just assumed that we would not be streaming the show at 11 p.m. and have come everywhere.
I'm long asleep by 11 p.m., so that would have been rough.
So, yeah, very much appreciate that. Subscribe to the show on YouTube. Also, if you're checking out the audio version and the numbers are growing on Apple and Spotify, we really appreciate that. Drop a review in there. Those aren't growing. There's not a lot of reviews. We'd love a 5-star review and something nice if you have it to say. If you don't have something nice to say and want to give less than 5 stars, keep it to yourself. But 5 stars we love. All right. Before we get into the picks, before we get into the undrafted free agents, we have to touch on this Shedeur Sanders prank call saga because it does kind of loosely connect back to the Jets world, right? Because it was, for people that didn't notice it or haven't heard about this, on Friday night, night 2 of the draft, before the Saints picked, somebody prank called Shedeur Sanders, saying they were Mickey Loomis, the general manager of the Saints, saying they were going to take him with the 40th pick. But then right before the end of the call saying, no, you're going to have to wait a little bit longer. Sorry, man. And it was awkward and weird. And of course, there was a film crew with Sanders. So his side of it is out there because they have it. And he was like, that was weird. It came out on Sunday. Well, it was leaked a little bit there was rumors on Saturday, but confirmation on Sunday that the pranker was Jack Ulbrich, son of Jeff Ulbrich. He got the phone number because, according to the release by the Atlanta Falcons, he saw Jeff's iPad open over the weekend or last week, saw that the contact information was in there, got the number, then made the prank call. He's a college kid. I don't know about you, Zack. I did stupid things in college. I didn't prank call potential NFL players. I also didn't have access to the phone numbers, so who knows?
Maybe you would have.
But just want your take. I don't want to go too far into this, but I think it's something we'll probably laugh off eventually. But it was obviously like a news story that stuck over the weekend in the cycle.
Yeah, I think the tensions were so high because of the fall for Shedeur. I don't know if I've ever seen a topic that really pit so many people against each other like Shedeur's fall, because you had the reporters explaining it, some, with facts, some with emotion, and then you have the flip side of, people are accusing it of racism and like all this stuff. And then the phone call compounded it, and it made even worse by the fact that there was video from both sides. I mean, the dumb kids posted the video.
That's the truly
maybe the dumbest thing.
As far as like the stupid college kid thing, like that took it to another level.
Yeah. And then Shedeur, as you said, had the cameras, but it's come out since. And from my understanding, it wasn't from the same two people. Like a lot of these prospects got pranked, and it sounds like this is something that has gone on for a long time. I don't know how everybody's getting access outside of the Ulbrich one, getting access to these numbers, but I saw Tyler Warren. I think I saw there was like a 6th round offensive tackle, Chase Lunt. I think there's a couple others that said that they got like 5 different prank calls, and like it's stupid.
And these phones come from the league, right? Like it's a specific.
Yeah. So
number.
I think so. I think there's some misconception about that. Yeah. I guess the NFL sends out phones to the prospects. So like it's very, and so there's just like a list for these teams to call when you draft a guy. And, if it leaks,
burner phone. The NFL
essentially burner phones. Yeah. But so I'll just look, I had a tweet that I regret the way I phrased it. I don't think it was anything flagrant or as serious as people have reacted to it, but I phrased it poorly, where I basically said that, he's, from what I understand, he's a good kid who made a mistake. Like he's a 21-year-old, so he's an adult. Like he's a college kid is what I meant. And my point was more, he did a really dumb fucking thing, and it was really fucked up, and he deserves like all the shit he's going to get for it. Anytime anybody looks up Jack Ulbrich from now on, this is going to be the first thing that comes up, and he has to live with that for the rest of his life. He's probably going to experience punishment either from the university or whatever, and I know his family is dealing with it in their own way. But I think it's gotten so overblown to the point where people are acting like this kid committed murder. I think just the timing of it and all of it was really bad, but he's a dumb 21-year-old that did a dumb thing. I don't think that makes him a bad person necessarily. And I realized like he had to go through all these steps to get to this point where, okay, he had to take the number, he had to take it down, he had to go to his friend. By the way, he's not the one who made the call technically, not like it matters, but the other guy he was in the background of the video. The other guy was making the call. And so he had to go through all this process, and at no point he thought to like stop. And so obviously he deserves all the criticism in the world for that. But my point was more just, I don't know. I don't know what my point was. I take a breath. Like, it's a prank call. I don't think it's the end of the world. I think it was fucked up, like I said. And he's if he hasn't already, he will suffer the consequences of it. And this is going to follow him for a long time. And that's all I really say on it. But I just wanted to address that tweet because I mean, my mentions are still blowing up. I'm trying to stay off Twitter. I think it'll blow over eventually. Shedeur is fine. Like it's again, like this drop was crazy. He didn't deserve to drop as far as he did. Probably, if we talked about it the other day, like a lot of it, I imagine, has to do with talent relative to the distraction that Shedeur brings. He wound up in Cleveland after all. And you wonder if the owner kind of pushed that or not, because it didn't. If there's a video of Andrew Barry and Kevin Stefanski where they are just like not very happy. But yeah, so I just think this like was amplified because of the videos and because it's Deion's kid. And I just think everybody should take a breath and move on, because I think Shedeur has moved on. And, you know, I think it's all stupid. A stupid kid did a stupid thing, and that's all there is. Like, it wasn't. Yeah, I don't think I don't know. I'm not going to speak for him. I don't know him personally, so I'll just say it was a really, really stupid thing, and we all know it.
And he did officially, formally apologize to the Sanders family. So I think we can all move on. The point that this happens all the time also is
that is a problem. Yeah.
It's a problem, and it makes you realize that the reason this one blew up is everything you just said. It was because it was Shedeur. It was because the kid involved in getting the number was the son of an NFL coach. Like, all that all makes sense, but like, keep in perspective that like he was a dummy that did something stupid, but there was a whole bunch of other dummies that did something stupid exactly the same, and we're never going to know any of their names.
Yeah, and I'll say, and we don't even know the name of the other kid in the video that actually made the call. By the way,
did the call.
Jack's has taken all the heat because he got the number, obviously. And I'll say maybe this will become a positive thing where the NFL will crack down on how they give out the numbers and who has access to them, because this should not happen to this degree. Like, that many prank calls. Like, I'd heard in the past about prank calls, and I think you hear about it all the time. I think people laughed it off in the past because you would hear like a story or two about it. But this is the fact that so many guys have these stories, like, that's a problem. Like, they need to fix that for sure.
Yeah, and obviously this was probably a bigger problem before they shifted to the system of sending out the phones. That was the first attempt to like cut down on it, and now you got to go a step further, and this will definitely raise awareness. All right, let's move on to the actual players who were drafted and not drafted, but are now part of the Jets. Let's start with day 3 picks. They got a receiver. And you talked a lot about the fact that like they had the opportunity to get the receiver on day 2 and passed and went for a cornerback who was good value. And a lot of people like that pick. It's just a factor of need. But they get Arian Smith in the 4th round. And really, when you look at the numbers, maybe reached a little bit there, but they obviously like what they see. And he is a absolute burner, 4.3, 640. The problem is actually catching the football.
I would say this was the most mixed reaction draft pick since I've covered the Jets, other than Will McDonald. I think I didn't really see
who's worked out.
Yeah, who has worked out. In terms of value, I get it. I think the top receiver that was still available was Jalen Royals, who was ranked, I think, graded as like a 3rd round pick by Dane. But the Jets were attacking traits, and they believe in their ability to develop him. And I noticed, and maybe we'll get into this later as we like just look at put a bow on the whole class. But Aaron Glenn kind of compared a lot of these guys to guys that he witnessed in Detroit, like a lot of these draft picks, which was interesting to me. Like, it seemed like he was targeting guys that kind of fit the mold of what they had in Detroit. And he compared him to Jameson Williams, who he said had some drop issues when he came in, and they worked on them, and then those went away, and they just had a burner who can make plays down the field. And the Jets don't really have that right now. Garrett can do a little bit of everything. But Josh Reynolds and Alan Lazard are more possession receivers. Malachi Corley's like a gadget guy, and Tyler Johnson's like a contested catch guy who can make some plays down the field. But Arian Smith is a burner who, if he's good, can open things up for Garrett Wilson in the middle of the field. And that's like the idea of why they targeted this kid. You know, like you said, he has the speed. He was the number one receiver on Georgia last year, I believe. The drops are absolutely an issue, and your belief in Arian Smith depends on if you believe receivers can grow out of that. He had 10 drops last year, and I think that was the most of any drafted player. So they did host him for a top 30 visit, which caught my eye because we didn't hear about a lot of top 30 visits, but he was one of them. And they wound up drafting him in the 4th round because they believe in his ability to come in and just be a deep threat for Justin Fields and for Garrett Wilson. I think it's fair to question the pick, but I also think there's talent there that if you can, I think there's some route running stuff too he needs to work on. But he seems like a really good kid, and the speed is something they were lacking on the outside. So I get it in that sense, even if maybe I wouldn't have picked him where they did.
The other thing that stood out to me as far as looking through, the information on him is surprisingly good blocker because he's not a big guy. And that's something that we continue to hear and see with the receivers they're bringing in. They're all good blockers. And then gunner on punt coverage, where he actually had a couple of tackles for Georgia last year.
That
so
adds
even
value,
if he's,
for sure.
So he's going to be a special teams guy, I would assume.
Yeah,
unless he breaks out as a deep threat.
Yeah.
Well, he's going to spend some time.
I'd say I think fans don't really like hearing like the special teams part is like a reason why you draft somebody higher than you're supposed to. But that does add to the appeal. Like he's a gunner, and they actually added both in free agency and in the draft. It seems like they prioritize adding like special teams mavens because they signed Chris Boyd. Kene Nwangwu is like purely a returner. They brought him in. And a few of these guys they drafted have a lot of experience on special teams, including the next one we'll talk about, the safety they drafted. I think he's good on special teams as well. So that's a priority. Irv Charles is probably going to miss a decent chunk of time because he tore his ACL late in the year, and he was their top gunner last year. So I think it's good to take some swings on guys that can play more than one, offense and special teams, or defense and special teams.
All right, 2nd, 4th round pick, Malachi Moore. It's when you take these guys from Georgia, right? Arian Smith and Moore from Alabama. It's like household names, even though they're later in the draft, just because those teams play so many games at the national level, in the college football playoff, national championship games. So I heard Malachi Moore and I was like, oh yeah, I know that guy, Alabama. But 4-year starter at Alabama. I didn't start all the time through 4 years, but started games all 4 years, including as a true freshman, which is very rare under the Nick Saban regime, considering the vast talent that was assembled down there in Tuscaloosa. But a little bit mixed as far as overall production.
Yeah, I like this pick a lot, actually. He's one I didn't know as much about beforehand, but as I dug into him and you ask around, he fits what Aaron Glenn wants out of his safeties, and they really needed a safety who can contribute right away, and I think he'll push to start like right away. If not, just be like rotate in with Tony Adams, but I think he can play right away. He's aggressive. He's a good leader. He's he, like I said, plays on special teams. He's another one who didn't test amazingly, but Aaron Glenn alluded to him. So Brian Branch is one of those guys you mentioned. He started over Brian Branch initially, and then Branch kind of took the job from him, and then Moore, but that allowed Moore to like play more positions. I think he has some experience in the nickel at both safety spots. And so Aaron Glenn was like, I literally called Brian Branch to ask him about Malachi Moore, and the first thing he said was dog, was the way he talked about him. So I think they view this as a kid who they traded up to get him. I think they view this as a kid who can come in and play right away. Their safety room, depending on where they slot Isaiah Oliver, I think he's probably more of a nickel in this defense than a safety, but depending on where they slot it, they need safety help quite a bit. And assuming they play at least 3 of these safeties and rotate them in and out, Malachi Moore will be in that mix. If you can get a guy in round 4 who could be a starter within a year or two, I think that's a pretty good pick. So I like this one quite a bit. Out of the day 3 picks, I think this is probably their best one on paper, at least. So I think he's going to be a contributor right away.
All right, 5th round, first pick of that round, Miami linebacker Francisco, and I meant to check in with you on this. Mauigoa?
I think that's right, Mauigoa, yeah.
All right.
They call him Kiko, so we can refer to him as
That's
Kiko.
Easier. Let's go with that.
Yeah, he's linebacker, they need depth. He's not someone I knew a lot about. Just looking at the scouting report from Dane, he says Mauigoa needs to clean up his missed tackles and coverage missteps, earn defensive snaps, but his instincts, chase, speed, and mentality are draftable traits that will endear him to NFL coaching. Again, special teams will help him make a team. They don't have really anything behind Quincy Williams and Jamian Sherwood that you feel confident about. They have Zaire Barnes, they drafted a couple years ago, has barely played. Caden Davis was a first-round pick for Washington a couple years ago. And they have Marcelino McCrary Ball. They don't have a lot of linebackers here. So he's someone that they hope can check in right away and contribute either as a third or fourth linebacker, a depth piece. So I don't blame them for drafting a linebacker. I mean, we'll get into a position they didn't draft. That was kind of confusing, but without knowing a lot about this kid, I think it was fine as a depth linebacker. I don't know if he projects really as a starter, though.
And then their last pick, 5th round, Tyler Barron, Miami edge rusher. Can never have enough edge rushers, at least another with the old regime.
I actually, Muji endeared himself to the media when he traded up to the back end of the 5th round.
I was going to say, you got off easy this year. No 6th, no 7th.
You still hold your breath in case they trade back in, but then they had their press conference. So you're like, okay, we're good. But yeah, Tyler Barron, he's purely a pass rush specialist, which they needed. Again, they don't have any depth is an issue on defense across the board outside of cornerback, I would say. So they needed a guy who could come in and just attack the quarterback. And that's what he is. That's what they kind of drafted Will McDonald as in the beginning. He's not Will McDonald level, but he was pretty productive the last 2 years. Do you know who his position coach was in Miami?
I don't.
Jason Taylor. So little connection there with Mason Taylor. So Tyler Barron, I think he could be a solid, just attack the quarterback guy. He's not really a run guy, rotational guy. You hope he can contribute right away. 5th round, anything you can get out of a 5th round pick, I think is a positive. But I did like this pick. He's not an amazing athlete, but he's a solid athlete and just really aggressive, high motor type of edge rusher. And he'll add depth either as the 3rd or 4th defensive end, I think.
All right, I want to do just overall, before we move to the undrafted free agents, I'd love your overall thoughts on this draft class. I want to read through a few comments from the chat. People aren't as high as... here we go. On to Sports 0015, give Muji a C. No good wide receiver drafted. Obviously, no defensive tackles, which we'll get into a little bit more. Not a great first draft. Taylor Delgado, like the Moore pick, makes a ton of sense. Michael Dunn says Smith has been riddled with injuries, including a wrist injury. Maybe there's something to that injury and his drop issues. So some speculation there. So overall thoughts on draft 1 for the new regime.
I think it was a solid draft. I think their day 1 and day 2 is really good, actually. And the more I've thought about the Azaria Thomas pick, I actually like it more because I think he has a lot of potential. I think he fell back because he didn't test that well. But the vibe I get is people are really high on this kid. And they think he has a lot of. I don't know if he's going to be an immediate contributor, but that's a long-term pick. This isn't a team that's going to make the playoffs. It's okay to make picks that aren't filling needs right now. I think that's a misconception. You should draft for need, but you also need to just draft the best players, especially when you're not good. If you're like the Eagles, you can target a position in need. If you're the Chiefs, you can target a position in need, but the Jets need to highlight the best possible players. And I love the Mason Taylor pick. You talked about that. Armin Membo, chalk, great pick. I think he's going to be a really good player. Zaire, I like Malachi Moore. You can question Arian Smith. The biggest question you can have is why they didn't draft the defensive tackle. Mm-hmm. I believe it was the Arian Smith pick. The Bills traded up right in front of them and picked Deone Walker from Kentucky. And then the Jets used all of their time on that pick, which makes you think that I haven't heard this officially, but I feel like they maybe wanted to draft him and the Bills knew that. So they traded up to get him before the Jets could. And I think he was a really, really intriguing guy. He's 6'6". It has a lot of
that stings in the division.
Yeah, it does. The Bills traded up in front of them twice, actually, which is kind of funny. But yeah, so that's the biggest question I have. Why didn't you pick a defensive tackle? And I know some people are mad they didn't pick a different wide receiver, but I'm not as mad about that. They got Mason Taylor in the 2nd round. That's the pass catcher they got. I would have considered Jalen Noel, as we talked about, in the 3rd round because I think he's going to be really good. But I think it was overall a solid draft, maybe a B- B type of situation. day 3 was a little more question marks, but day 3, you're taking swings on traits. You're taking swings on the kind of players that you want in your building, guys that can contribute on special teams, all those kind of things. So I didn't blame them. They actually, we're going to get into UDFAs actually, so I'll wait on that in terms of like defensive tackle stuff. Cause today I saw a name that they signed that was intriguing, but yeah, I just think it was a solid draft. Like they didn't make a lot of noise with this draft. They could have drafted a quarterback at some point. I don't know if they like the guys in this class in terms of that. But they got the support around Justin Fields that they needed for the most part, especially with Taylor and Membo. And I think the most important picks are the ones in the beginning of the draft. If you get those right, you can get away with getting the late picks wrong. If you get the first couple picks right, like the Jets did in 2022, we've talked about that class so much, but their 3 first-round picks, all really good players. Breece Hall, really good. After that, maybe you have a little more questions about the Jeremy Ruckards, Max Mitchells, Michael Clemens. But those first few picks, we're going to view that as one of the best draft classes in Jets history. And it's because of those first 2 rounds. And so if they hit on those first 3-4 picks, or the Malachi Moore pick, including in there, the first 4 picks or whatever, I think you feel pretty good about it.
All right, let's get into the undrafted free agents. I want to start with Donovan Edwards because the guy was on the cover of EA Sports College Football Game, right? It's funny of the expectations around Donovan Edwards, how his career at Michigan started. He was obviously never like the bell cow guy there because they have such a stable of running backs. But he had huge moments in huge playoff games, was part of the national championship team, but then just didn't finish the career the way you kind of would have thought he would. And he ends up not even getting drafted. I think he had a 7th round grade from Dane.
Yeah.
And he ends up going undrafted, but it's certainly an interesting pick when you look at this guy and his size, his speed.
Yeah. He'll wind up probably, unless there's somebody else that hasn't been announced yet or reported, he'll wind up being the highest rated, I would say, probably out of this group. Last year it was Leonard Taylor, I believe, and Eric Watts. He's a guy that, like you said, after his sophomore year, he was talked about as like a draft guy that was going to get drafted pretty high when it came his time. Then he wasn't as productive the last 2 years, but he's someone that brings a little bit of a different skill set than the 3 running backs they have on their roster right now. Breece is like an explosive north-south runner. Braylon Allen and Isaiah Davis are more in between the tackles, tough guys. Breece Hall is a good pass catcher, but and just really explosive. But Donovan Edwards is a little smaller. He's 5'11". He's pretty quick, but he's a really good pass catcher. That's his strength. So I think there's a path to making the roster for him. I did a initial 53 today. He was one of my toughest cuts. I just had a hard time fitting him in without seeing how he looks in training camp. But he's someone that absolutely has a chance to make this team because they didn't really add anything at running back this offseason. They brought back Kenny Nwangwu. I don't really count him as a running back. He's just a returner. They signed a fullback in Andrew Beck. He has a chance to make the team because they're going to run the ball a lot. But Donovan Edwards, if they keep 4 legit running backs, he has a real shot of making it, especially because, like I said, you have a speed guy, 2 strength guys. If you want to back up, that's more in the Breece realm. It's Edwards out of this group.
All right, quarterback. They did get a quarterback. Yeah. Brady Cook, 3-year starter at Missouri. It was part of Missouri had some pretty good teams the last couple of years. This guy played a lot for them. What have you learned about him?
Yeah, I mean, in terms of passing the ball, I don't know that he's the most accurate passer, but he's maybe one of the best athletes outside of Jalen Milroe and maybe a couple others in this draft. He ran a 4.59 40 with a 37-inch vertical and a 10-foot 8-inch broad jump. Good running quarterback athlete. And it makes sense that they're targeting a guy like that because that's what this offense is going to be. You have Justin Fields, you have Tyrod Taylor. I don't get a great vibe on how they feel about where Jordan Travis is at. The way they just kind of refuse to talk about him when we ask about him is not a great sign. So I think Cook can push Travis if they keep 3 quarterbacks. I'm not convinced they will. I think you maybe keep 2 and then you put somebody on the practice squad, whether it's Travis or Cook or even Adrian Martinez. But yeah, you want to sign an undrafted quarterback every year. I would say even if it's just for OTAs, just see what they have, give them a chance in training camp. And I think Brady Cook will be a fun one to watch with the 3rd and 4th team offense as we get into camp. And you see a lot of those young guys getting out there and getting a shot.
All right, Jordan Clark, cornerback out of Notre Dame, son of ESPN analyst Ryan Clark. I thought this was interesting that Ryan Clark, I didn't realize this until doing a little reading today. Obviously, we all know Ryan Clark, right? He played for the Steelers forever. He's great on ESPN. He wasn't drafted, which I didn't realize. So he was an undrafted free agent who turned it into a 13-year. I think he was a Pro Bowler at some point. I did not look that up. That may not be true, but it was a good play.
I think he was, but maybe not. He was a good player though for the Steelers. Yeah.
Yeah, for a long time. So Jordan Clark, I think that's an interesting pick.
Yeah, I mean, I'm looking at his bio now. I guess he played 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 years in college, 5 of them at Arizona State. Just so like one of those older prospects, not great measurables or like his time stuff. Like he's 5'9", 184, pretty small, and he ran a 4.66 40 and had a 7.313 cone, which isn't very good. But he has the bloodlines. In Dane's scouting report, he says he's very smooth in his movements, doesn't look out of depth with man coverage duties. Shows hip snap as a tackler, though his technique can be buttoned up to help him be a consistent finisher. He's a fluid athlete with a nose for the football, and the team speak highly about his intangibles and interviews, which makes sense when Ryan Clark is your father. Mm-hmm. Corner is going to be the toughest position to make the team on this roster. Like Quantes Stiggers made it for me, and even that was tough because I think that gave them like 7 or 8 corners technically because Chris Boyd is listed at 1. They drafted 1. So they're pretty deep there. And if you consider Isaiah Oliver a corner, so it's gonna be tough for him to make the team, but he has a shot at the practice squad certainly.
Dean Clark, another Clark, no relation, out of Fresno State. Just the one thing I saw, it said I was decisive, that allows him to finish. So he's a safety who can come up and make tackles. But obviously, unlike cornerback, they could use depth at safety.
Yeah, and that's why I actually had him on my initial 53. I believe Rich Cimini reported he got $160,000 guaranteed, which doesn't necessarily guarantee anything. I think that's a misconception sometimes with the DFAs. Like, I think they can get up to $200,000 or something, and I believe
it just shows that there was interest from.
It shows there was interest
in win a bidding,
and it's a way of convincing them to stick around when they cut them and come onto their practice squad too. But Dane has said he's a rangy physical defender with interchangeable skill set who can provide depth at multiple spots and shine on special teams. Like that sounds like a guy. Versatility, special teams, that's a path onto the roster. So that's why I put him on the 53 because, like I said, if Isaiah Oliver they view as a corner, or maybe he's a corner safety hybrid, like you only have 3 real locks at the safety position, which are Tony Adams, Andre Sisco, and Malachi Moore. So there's a spot there, and they're going to play safeties quite a bit, so they need a backup. So he has a chance. Again, it depends on what position they have Isaiah Oliver at and Jarek Bernard-Converse if they move him back to safety maybe, but he intrigued me for sure.
Jamarcus Weston, edge rusher from Florida. They go back to the SEC.
Yeah, he's a fascinating one. He reportedly was the one who got the $200,000 bonus. He started his college career at receiver, moved to safety, and then became a defensive end at the end. So he's a very raw player, but really, really good special teams guy, which I think is why they give him so much money. I think they view him as a potential special teams kind of standout. I'd never heard of him before this, but he really, really intrigues me. And I think we're going to find out how much they value the special team side of things, because some teams value it more than others, where guys will make the team purely because of their special team skills. And based on the money they gave him, like I would not rule out him making the team, especially because they need some depth at edge. So if they like his potential there, he's one to keep an eye on for sure.
And growth into a position too.
Yeah.
All right. 2 kickers were drafted. The Patriots, who always seem to draft a kicker, got Andres Borregales out of Miami. He was the number 1 guy on Dane's list. Ryan Fitzgerald was the number 2 guy on Dane's list. He did not get drafted. Caden Davis, who the Jets signed as an undrafted free agent, was number 4 on the beast, and a guy that the Jets obviously think higher of. And then the second player who was drafted was actually ranked below Davis.
Tyler Loop from Arizona.
You're right there you go.
Yeah. Yeah, but I think it's going to be a legit kicker competition. They have 3 guys now. So you have Greg Zuerlein, you have Anders Carlson, and you have this kid who will have a chance to win. Like, I think whoever's the best kicker is going to win the job. From what I read, he's a little inexperienced. Like, he's pretty new to kicking, at least like in terms of like college kicking. I think it was like 2 or 3 years ago when he first started kicking. He made a couple 50-yarders. I think he was pretty clutch. I don't know, actually. I should dig into that. So he's someone to keep an eye on. He's bigger. He's like 6'2", which is always funny when you have a big kicker. But he's someone to keep an eye on. They have legit competitions at kicker and punter now because they also signed someone this offseason. And there's one more that wasn't on the list I sent you because, as I alluded to earlier, they signed a guy named Peyton Page from Clemson. He's a defensive tackle. He was like a rotational guy for them. He didn't play a lot. They were pretty loaded on the D-line, but he's 6'4", 300, and he scored on a pick 6 last year. So you got a big guy touchdown. And they didn't draft any defensive tackles. I actually saw it as like an endorsement of Leonard Taylor. I should mention, I think as of 4 p.m. today, the compensatory pick formula no longer applies. So wouldn't shock me if the Jets like look at signing either a linebacker, defensive tackle, or safety at some point, like a veteran guy where you don't affect your comp pick formula. But Peyton Page is somebody that, I'm curious to see how he looks in camp, because I think there's jobs that can be won on that D line.
All right. Anything overall? Anybody else stand out from the undrafteds?
There was a receiver from Kansas, I believe his name's Quentin Skinner. He made a lot of big plays at Kansas, but again, receiver is a tough group to sneak into in this, because you have 6 guys that are locks with Garrett Wilson, Alan Lazard, assuming he sits around, Josh Reynolds, Malachi Corley, Arian Smith, and then I think Tyler Johnson will probably make it. So that's 6 receivers right there. And then if Irv Charles is healthy, that's 7. So I don't see an undrafted rookie making it, but if you blow them away in camp, you have a chance. And I think his guarantee was like 150,000 or something like that, which is a decent size. They did sign I don't have his name in front of me. I forgot about him. They signed a defensive tackle from West Virginia as well. So I forgot to mention him. He's a big bodied guy. I think he's supposed to be a good run stopper. So there'll be some competition at DT, but yeah, I'm curious to see if they sign a veteran. Not the comp pick formula's over.
And then Taylor just had a question before we say goodbye, just confirming that they do have a new special teams coach. So it is interesting to see how that impacts, because they had the same special teams coach for so long, and he seemed to grow with like his influence over that time. And so it's interesting to have someone new.
Yeah, I mean, Chris Banjo is like my age, and he just retired like 2 years ago from playing. But he's really, really highly regarded. Sean Payton told me he thinks he's going to be a head coach. I actually want to write about him at some point. But so new special teams coach. I'm very curious to see what kind of players he looks for. We'll probably talk to them for the first time in the coming month or two. Between him, Tanner Engstrand, and Steve Wilkes, their coordinators. We'll probably get interviews with them once OTA start. But Chris Banjo is a special teams guy, and clearly they're kind of listening to him, I would assume, because they drafted a lot of guys with a special teams background. So I'm sure he had some input with that.
I feel like when it comes down to, you come down to 2 players and they just feel the same. Hey, this guy does special teams. Like, totally. It's just I'm
sure that's a part of the convo. Yeah.
It's a tiebreaker. All right. That's the draft 2025. 7 new players drafted, plus a slew of undrafted free agents. We will obviously see how it all plays out over the course of the summer. We got rookie camp. We'll have OTAs, and all of it will be with you throughout it. Thanks for tuning in to the Flight Plan Podcast. I'm Tim McMaster. He's Zach Rosenblatt. We'll talk to everybody soon.